Before you hear another word, ask yourself this one question. What if the person who walked away from you never actually knew what happened after they left? What if the version of your story they carried in their mind was completely different from the reality you lived every single day? For the longest time, your soulmate believed that although the separation was painful, you eventually found your footing again. They imagined you surrounded by supportive people, slowly rebuilding your life, smiling more often, and leaving the past behind one step at a time. They never imagined that after they walked away, there were nights when the silence became louder than any conversation, moments when you held yourself together in front of everyone else, only to fall apart when nobody was watching. They never knew that your strongest smiles often hid your deepest heartbreak. But something unexpected has happened. During an ordinary conversation, someone who had no intention of changing anyone's life simply spoke honestly about what they had witnessed. They mentioned how deeply you struggled, how quietly you carried your pain, and how you never tried to make anyone feel guilty for what happened. They weren't telling a dramatic story. They were simply describing the truth. Yet those few honest words landed in your soulmate's heart with a weight they never expected. Suddenly, everything they thought they knew about your healing began to crumble. The image they had carried for so long no longer matched reality. Instead of remembering someone who quickly moved on, they were forced to picture someone who loved so deeply that they chose to suffer in silence rather than blame the person who hurt them. That realization has shaken them more than they can explain. They can't stop wondering how they missed something so important, how someone they once knew so well managed to carry that much pain without ever letting the world see it. Stay with me, because what your soulmate heard during that accidental conversation didn't just reveal your suffering, it completely changed the way they see your love, your strength, and every decision they made after walking away, leaving them with a truth they are finding almost impossible to carry. The words your soulmate heard were never meant to become a life-changing revelation. They weren't searching for answers. They weren't asking anyone to tell them what happened after they walked away. In fact, they had spent a long time convincing themselves that the hardest part of the story had already passed. They believed that although the separation had hurt both of you, time had eventually softened the pain. They imagined you finding new routines, smiling again, rebuilding your life little by little. It was a comforting story because it allowed them to believe that no lasting damage had been done. But sometimes, a single honest sentence has the power to destroy an illusion that has survived for years. During an ordinary conversation, someone casually mentioned what they had seen with their own eyes. They spoke about the nights when you withdrew from everyone around you. They described how you carried yourself with quiet strength while privately struggling through emotions that very few people ever witnessed. They mentioned that you never spoke with anger, never tried to blame anyone, and never sought sympathy. You simply carried the weight of your broken heart as silently as you could. Those words landed in your soulmate's heart with incredible force because they weren't spoken to make them feel guilty. They were spoken as simple truth, and truth has a way of reaching places excuses never can. You may wonder why hearing this from someone else affected them so deeply. Why now? Why not before? The answer is that people often understand pain differently when it comes from an unexpected witness instead of the person who experienced it. Had you told them yourself, they might have believed emotions were making the situation seem bigger than it was. But hearing someone else quietly describe your silent suffering removed every reason for doubt. It became impossible to dismiss because the person sharing it had nothing to gain. They weren't trying to influence your soulmate's feelings. They were simply describing reality. That honesty carried a kind of credibility your soulmate couldn't ignore. For the first time, they were forced to see your pain, not through assumptions, but through someone else's sincere observation. Imagine finding an old journal tucked away inside a forgotten drawer. You open it expecting ordinary thoughts, but instead you discover page after page describing lonely nights, unanswered prayers, and moments of heartbreak you never knew existed. Every sentence leaves you wondering how someone managed to carry so much without asking anyone to rescue them. You keep turning the pages, hoping the next chapter will become easier to read. But each page reveals another layer of quiet strength hidden beneath silent tears. That's what this revelation feels like to your soulmate. They aren't simply hearing a story about your past. They are discovering chapters of your emotional journey they never knew were being written while they believed life was moving forward as normal. Another image comes to mind. Picture a candle burning alone in a dark room long after everyone else assumes it has gone out. From outside the room, people believe the flame disappeared hours ago. But inside, it continues burning quietly, consuming itself little by little until someone finally opens the door and sees that it never stopped shining. Your love was much like that candle. While your soulmate believed the emotions had faded with time, your heart continued carrying hope, sadness, questions, and memories in complete silence. You didn't make your pain visible to everyone around you. You protected it because that was the only way you knew how to keep moving forward. Learning this has completely changed the way your soulmate understands everything that happened after they left. Now they can't stop asking themselves difficult questions. Where was I while they were carrying all of this? How many nights did they cry without anyone knowing? How many times did they pretend they were okay because they didn't want to burden anyone else? Those questions follow them into quiet moments because they no longer have easy answers. They are beginning to realize that your greatest act of love wasn't holding on to the relationship. It was refusing to let your pain become someone else's punishment. Instead of speaking badly about them, you protected their name. Instead of turning your heartbreak into bitterness, you chose dignity. That realization has become one of the hardest truths they have ever faced, because it reveals the depth of your love in a way they never fully understood before. There is an old saying that feels especially meaningful here. The deepest wounds are often carried by the quietest hearts. Your soulmate is beginning to understand those words with painful clarity. They now realize that your silence was never proof that you didn't care. It was proof that you cared so deeply you chose to suffer without demanding that anyone else carry the weight with you. Every memory they revisit now feels different. Every goodbye carries a new meaning. Every moment they assumed you were healing now feels like a moment when you were simply learning how to survive. And with every realization, the image they once held of your strength continues changing. They no longer see someone who quickly moved on. They see someone who loved completely, suffered quietly, and never stopped choosing grace, even when their own heart was breaking. That truth has become impossible for them to forget, and it is awakening emotions they can no longer push aside. The truth your soulmate heard didn't simply make them feel sad. It completely changed the way they remember you. Ever since that unexpected conversation, they have found themselves returning to moments they thought they had already understood, only to realize they never truly saw them for what they were. The memories haven't changed, but the meaning behind them has. They remember the times when your voice sounded quieter than usual. They remember the moments when you smiled, even though your eyes carried a sadness they failed to notice. They remember conversations that ended with you simply saying, "It's okay," and walking away without asking for anything more. Back then, they believed those moments were signs that you were slowly accepting the situation. Now they understand something completely different. They realize you weren't giving up because you stopped caring. You were trying to protect your heart while carrying a pain too deep to explain. That realization has become impossible for them to ignore because every memory now reveals a truth they completely overlooked when it mattered most. Imagine listening to a song for years because you enjoy the melody. You hum along without ever paying attention to the lyrics. Then one day, during a difficult season of your life, you truly hear the words for the first time. Suddenly the song means something entirely different. The melody hasn't changed. The lyrics haven't changed. The only thing that changed is your understanding. That's exactly what is happening inside your soulmate's heart. They are hearing the story of your love all over again, but this time they finally understand the meaning behind every quiet action, every patient response, and every silent goodbye. They are beginning to realize that your love was speaking long after your words had run out. Another image comes to mind. Imagine walking through an art gallery where every painting appears to be in black and white. You appreciate the artwork, but it never truly moves you. Then someone hands you a special lens, and suddenly every painting bursts into color. Details you never noticed become impossible to ignore. Hidden emotions appear in every brushstroke. The paintings were always colorful. You simply lacked the ability to see them. That special lens is what the truth has become for your soulmate. It has allowed them to see your journey through a completely different perspective. They now recognize that what looked like emotional distance was often emotional exhaustion. What looked like acceptance was actually quiet resilience. What looked like silence was a heart choosing dignity instead of resentment. This has led them to ask one question they can no longer escape. Did they love me more than I ever realized? That question echoes through their thoughts because every answer points toward the same truth. They now understand that love isn't always measured by dramatic declarations or endless conversations. Sometimes love is measured by what someone continues doing after their heart has already been broken. You continued wishing them well when bitterness would have been easier. You continued carrying yourself with kindness when anger might have felt justified. You chose not to turn your pain into revenge. Instead, you quietly carried it while hoping life would eventually bring peace, even if that peace arrived without the future you once imagined. Your soulmate is finally recognizing that kind of love, and it has left them speechless. Think about a tree standing alone through every season. During spring, everyone admires its blossoms. During summer, they enjoy its shade. But very few people notice how much strength it takes for that same tree to survive the harsh winds of winter. When spring returns again, people celebrate the beauty without realizing everything the tree endured to remain standing. That's how your soulmate now sees you. They always appreciated parts of who you were, but they never fully understood the strength hidden beneath your calm exterior. They now realize that while they believed you were simply moving forward, you were surviving one difficult day at a time with a courage that never asked to be recognized. That understanding has filled them with admiration as much as regret. There is another reason this revelation has affected them so deeply. They are beginning to recognize that your actions always carried more honesty than your words. You never tried to convince them to stay by making them feel guilty. You never exaggerated your pain to gain sympathy. Even after the separation, you protected your dignity instead of seeking attention. That quiet integrity has become one of the most powerful lessons they have ever received. They now understand that genuine love doesn't always demand to be seen. Sometimes it simply remains faithful to its own kindness. Even when no one notices the sacrifices being made. There's an old saying that speaks directly to this moment. The loudest proof of love is often found in the quietest acts of the heart. Your soulmate is finally living the meaning of those words. They no longer need someone else to explain how deeply you cared, because every memory now speaks for itself. Every moment of patience, every act of understanding, every silent goodbye has become undeniable evidence of a love they underestimated while it was right in front of them. That realization has awakened a deep sense of remorse they can no longer silence. They are no longer grieving only the relationship they lost. They are grieving the version of you they failed to fully appreciate while you were still standing beside them. And as this understanding continues growing inside them, another emotion is beginning to rise alongside the regret, the overwhelming desire to somehow make peace with a truth that arrived far too late, yet still refuses to let their heart rest. Ever since your soulmate learned the truth about how deeply you suffered after they walked away, one emotion has refused to leave them alone. It isn't simply sadness. It isn't only regret. It's the painful realization that while you were quietly carrying the weight of heartbreak, they never truly understood what was happening inside your world. That thought has become impossible for them to escape. They replay old memories, searching for moments where they could have noticed something different. They remember unanswered messages they assumed weren't important. They remember conversations they ended too quickly. They remember the times when your silence seemed like acceptance, only to discover now that it was actually a heart trying to survive disappointment without making anyone else feel responsible. The more they reflect, the more they realize that they weren't looking at your actions through the eyes of understanding. They were looking through assumptions, and assumptions often hide the truth that matters most. Imagine arriving at a train station just seconds after the final train has disappeared into the distance. You can still see it on the horizon, but no matter how loudly you call out, it keeps moving farther away. The hardest part isn't watching it leave. The hardest part is knowing that if you had arrived just a little earlier, everything could have been different. That is how your soulmate feels now. They aren't only grieving what was lost. They're grieving the opportunities they never realized they still had. Every memory has become another reminder that while you were silently hoping to be understood, they believed there would always be another chance to ask how you were truly feeling. Now they understand that some moments don't disappear because love ends. They disappear because people don't recognize their importance until they've already passed. Another image comes to mind. Imagine finding an unopened letter tucked inside an old drawer years after it was written. You finally unfold it, expecting ordinary words, but instead you discover heartfelt emotions, honest vulnerability, and answers to questions you've carried for years. As you read each line, one thought keeps repeating in your mind, "If only I had read this sooner." The letter itself never changed. What changed was the moment you finally became ready to receive its message. Your soulmate feels as though they have just opened that letter. The truth they recently heard has become every word they never read when it mattered most. It has revealed the depth of your love, the loneliness you quietly endured, and the incredible strength it took for you to continue moving forward without asking anyone to carry your pain. You may wonder why they haven't immediately reached out if their heart has changed so much. The answer isn't because they don't care. It's because genuine remorse often arrives with deep humility. They aren't afraid of admitting they were wrong. They're afraid that hearing from them might reopen wounds you've worked so hard to heal. They keep asking themselves difficult questions. Do I even deserve another conversation? Have they finally found peace without me? Would reaching out bring comfort, or would it only remind them of everything they fought so hard to overcome? Those questions create hesitation because they are no longer thinking only about what they want. For the first time, they are thinking about what might be best for you. That shift reveals how deeply this truth has transformed them. There is an old saying that carries extraordinary wisdom. The greatest regrets are born not from what we knew, but from what we learned too late. Your soulmate now understands exactly what those words mean. They cannot change the nights you spent crying in silence. They cannot erase the loneliness you carried after they walked away. But they can no longer pretend those moments never happened. Every truth they have learned has become a lesson written directly on their heart. They are beginning to understand that real love is not measured by how someone feels when everything is easy. It is measured by how deeply they value another person's heart once they finally understand what that heart endured for them. And now that this understanding has fully awakened inside them, something greater than guilt is beginning to grow. It's a sincere desire to face the truth with honesty, to stop running from the past, and to find the courage to do what fear prevented them from doing before, speak from the heart. Without pride, without excuses, and without hiding behind silence any longer. As this message comes to its end, there is one truth your soulmate can no longer avoid. The accidental conversation that revealed your silent suffering wasn't meant to punish them for the rest of their life. It happened because some truths refused to stay hidden forever. For so long, they believed they understood how your story ended. They convinced themselves that although the separation had been painful, both of you eventually found peace in your own ways. That belief allowed them to keep moving forward without asking the difficult questions. But now that illusion has disappeared. They finally know that while they were trying to make sense of their own emotions, you were quietly carrying heartbreak with remarkable grace. You weren't asking the world to notice your pain. You weren't trying to make anyone feel guilty. You simply kept putting one foot in front of the other, hoping that one day your heart would become lighter than the memories it carried. Your soulmate now realizes that this quiet strength was one of the greatest expressions of love they had ever witnessed, and they completely underestimated it when it mattered most. Imagine standing beside a lake early in the morning before the wind begins to move. The surface appears calm, almost perfectly still. Looking at it from a distance, you might believe nothing is happening beneath it. But deep below the surface, life continues moving in ways the eye cannot see. That was your heart after they walked away. From the outside, people saw someone trying to stay composed, someone who continued fulfilling responsibilities, someone who rarely complained. But beneath that calm surface, there were waves of grief, unanswered questions, quiet prayers, and moments of loneliness that very few people ever understood. Your soulmate has finally been shown what existed beneath the surface, and that discovery has changed everything. They no longer judge your healing by what the world could see. They now understand that the greatest battles are often fought where no audience exists. Another image comes to mind. Imagine finding a garden that somehow continued blooming, despite receiving very little rain. At first, you admire the flowers without thinking much about how they survived. Then someone tells you how close they came to withering away, how they endured difficult seasons through quiet resilience, and how they kept growing even when no one believed they could. Suddenly, your admiration becomes something much deeper. That's how your soulmate now sees you. They no longer remember only the happy moments you shared together. They remember the incredible strength it took for you to keep choosing kindness after heartbreak, to continue believing in love after disappointment, and to protect your own dignity instead of allowing pain to turn into bitterness. Those qualities have become impossible for them to overlook because they now understand what they cost you. There is an old saying that reminds us, the strongest hearts are not the ones that never break, but the ones that keep loving after they have been broken. Your soulmate is finally beginning to understand the meaning of those words. They now see that your greatest act of love wasn't trying to hold on to someone who had already walked away. Your greatest act of love was refusing to let heartbreak change the goodness inside you. You chose compassion when resentment would have been easier. You chose silence instead of revenge. You chose healing one difficult day at a time, even when no one applauded your courage. That realization has become one of the most powerful lessons your soulmate has ever received, because it has shown them what genuine love truly looks like. So as this chapter gently closes, don't let your heart remain trapped in the memories of the nights when you believed your pain would never be understood. Those nights shaped your strength, but they do not define your future. The truth has finally reached the person who needed to hear it most, and with that truth comes a new kind of understanding that neither of you possessed before. Whether this journey leads to reconciliation, heartfelt closure, or simply a deeper appreciation for what was shared, one thing can never be taken away. Your love was real, your pain was real, your resilience was real. And now, at last, your soulmate knows that the greatest part of your story was never how deeply you suffered after they walked away. It was the extraordinary strength with which you chose to rise again, carrying a heart that remained kind even after it had been broken. Sometimes healing truly begins not when the pain disappears, but when the truth finally finds the heart that was meant to understand it.